Hi Diana.
Hey.
It was a great speech by you today.
Thank you.
Did everything go according to the plan, or was there some?
Yeah, I finished a bit over time, but everything else is fine.
If you had to summarize your talk, the main message you wanted to kind of give to the crowd with this talk, what would it be?
Yeah. Innovation and new business model inventions are going to be coming from emerging markets in the next years. And we're already seeing that with China. We're seeing new models in India and East Africa that are all really paving the way for the future.
Yeah, okay. You've been actually working quite a lot in emerging markets. So what is it that attracts you? Is there something that you really like about them? So that's what you do.
Yeah. One I talked about on stage, it makes me feel like Christopher Columbus expanding to new horizons and also deepening our understanding of 90% of humanity, because 90% of the population in the world is living in emerging markets. And right now we have such a shallow understanding of those markets, because for businesses, they're like, oh, that's not where the money is. But I challenged that in the talk I had, because a lot of the next folks that will go into the middle class, which is the consumer class, will come from emerging markets.
Yeah, and we're seeing that in China as well now, right? So
Exactly.
Very booming middle class.
Yeah.
So, and what would you say is the biggest difference between doing business or developing products in emerging markets versus advanced economies?
Yeah, interesting. Predictability, probably. In some of these markets, one, it's hard because there might not be as much structure, and this is talking generally. But for example, you think about developed economies, starting a business, because people have done that often over and over formally, people already know the process. Whereas maybe starting a business in Malawi, it's not very common for people to do entrepreneurship formally, and hence the process itself isn't clear. And maybe there are also some legal constructs that could be challenging.
Yeah.
So predictability.
Okay, and you mentioned that a lot of innovation is coming out of these emerging markets. So, do you think there is a chance that the advanced economies, the U.S., the European economies, will actually have to play catch up to innovation coming from emerging markets?
That's already happening.
Yeah.
You go to Germany and it's still a cash-driven society. You go to China and you don't even have to carry any cash, or if you go visit, basically they are using WeChat, which is a super app, scanning a QR code in any small mom and pop shop, or even on the street if they buy something, they're able to then go stay an extended amount of time without using cash. So I think this is already happening, and it's going to be happening at a faster rate, because in these countries they're leapfrogging technology. Whereas in developed economies we're so steeped in legacy technology, and also a lot of these companies want to keep the status quo. So for example, in the US, the credit cards is used very commonly. And if the credit card companies lose their business, obviously they wouldn't want that.
So you also mentioned the adoption of cryptocurrencies. That's been a hot topic, right? Some time ago already. It's like so do you see there was the example of Venezuela because of their very high inflation rates. Do you see a future where there might be actually that the majority of payments, or a lot of the payment share of the payments, are done with cryptocurrencies? And how do you see the future of adopting cryptocurrencies as such?
It's such a buzzword, and actually similar to like AI. I think the future for cryptocurrency is going to be defined by the regulatory environment in some of these countries. So there are certain contexts, I mentioned Venezuela and Argentina, where the economic woes are forcing them to adopt some consistent form of value storage. But in other economies, maybe economically it's not as strained, and hence cryptocurrency is more of a nice to have. And if it's a nice to have, for some places they still prefer cash, and a huge population will still prefer what they understand, right? But for Venezuela and Argentina and some other economies, they have no choice. So I don't know if it's going to be mainstream. I probably don't think so, from my opinion, but some people will challenge that. But there will be parts of the economy where this unique blend of economic structure will force it to adopt new innovations.
Are there actually any existing regulations in Venezuela regarding crypto?
They right now, in the last couple of months, they saw 1,000% growth in cryptocurrency because of their 1 million inflation rate. Yeah. So.
Okay, and what are some of the biggest challenges you actually face in day-to-day work? It's probably similar to as for others, right? It's.
Yeah, one thing that people don't talk about, again, where my work is heavily steeped in developing products for emerging markets. So half the battle is helping people understand how they live in emerging markets. Because some of these folks have grown up in the US or in developed economies, so they don't understand the concept that certain people live paycheck to paycheck, or that in certain economies people are not able to, or don't have a common way of like purchasing things. And hence me having to educate them or helping get our research organizations involved to help the team understand that and set a common path, then allows us to then go full momentum. Because if there is a lack of understanding between each of the people and we're trying to build a product or requirements, there's always going to be in the back of their head, oh, why are we doing it this way? Because in the US it's being done this way. So hence getting people to a common set of understandings about emerging markets has been a huge part of the battle.
They are also different, right? So
yeah,
it's different understandings.
Yeah, because it's a mix of culture, history, and all of these things mixed together is also what excites me about emerging markets. There's so much of this complexity that's just waiting to be unraveled, and that at the end of the day is sort of my life vision, mission, is to just bring that understanding to the surface and make people realize that there's different perspectives and they're not mutually exclusive, they can coexist.
That's very good, well said.
Yeah.
One of the actions you mentioned in your speech for new product development was to actually spend a day with your potential customer or your target customer. And can you elaborate? I think it's a great thing to do, just to get a much better understanding of the customers. But can you elaborate maybe how do you actually do it in practice and how often?
Sure.
And also do you do it only in the starting phase of the project development, or you should do it
continually?
Continually. Yeah.
For a startup, it's as creepy as literally asking someone if you can follow them around throughout the whole day, and you have to pay them some, or maybe it could be a friend, and hence the actual practice is one, getting consent from someone. Let me back up. First is understanding the typical persona that should be using your product and defining that very clearly, because then you know who to choose. Otherwise, you pick anyone off the street and that might not be representative. So that number one is choosing your persona. Two is then selecting people who might be interested. So for example, if you go to universities and they are looking for research candidates, they post papers saying, oh, I'll give you $20 an hour. So that's the second logistical part. And three, the actual walking around with the person or the customer. You can either don't give any input and follow them around to see on a typical day what are the types of stores they go to, what activity, or you can give them specific tasks and see how they actually accomplish it. So for example, if I say, oh, I want you to go buy milk, how do you go about it? Yeah. And that might deepen your understanding if you are a milk company and trying to understand, does brand sentiment matter? Does distribution channel matter, etc.?
Have you actually spent like a whole day with somebody?
We have done this in Kenya because I've been working on a product launch in Kenya, and I haven't spent the whole day, but partially of it, we would sit down with them and give them specific tasks to do. Yeah, and it's something, to your last question, you do continually, because one, you always have to question your assumptions, and two, if your product is always being iterated on, you need to get feedback from the user, how they react to that.
That's cool. Okay, and to finish off, is there something, or some suggestion you would give to the local, the Baltic, the Latvian startup community so according to your speech?
travel more to emerging markets. I felt like when I asked in the crowd, like, how many of you guys have gone to China? How many of you guys have understood Nigeria? There was a low number of hands. So I think just getting out of this area, and you guys are in a very unique position geographically. I mean, Russia's not far, and then Russia, pieces of it are really close to Asia. So you guys are like dead in the center, and that really becomes the bridge between being able to connect the West and then the East.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the interview.
Of course.
Yes.
Thank you for the great questions.